Hey, hope you're doing well. Andy here from Drive Steady, and in this video I'm reviewing the Mercedes Benz GLS450. So listen up, the GLS is now in its second generation and is the biggest SUV Mercedes currently makes. When the original GLS debuted over a decade ago, many thought, what's the deal with the 7-seater? But here we are, and the GLS is one of the most popular full-size SUVs in the market, competing with the likes of the Escalade, the Navigator, and most directly, the X7 from BMW. And given that I recently drove an X7, I'm excited to see what this thing has to offer. So let's see what it's all about in this review of the Mercedes Benz GLS450. Alright, so let's get started with the review with a big thank you to Keys Mercedes for allowing me to review this GLS450 today. If you're interested in any new or pre-owned Mercedes, please give them a call. I've left their information in the description below. They've also got a pretty interesting non-Mercedes pre-owned inventory, so definitely check it out. Now, the GLS, I'm actually a big fan of the way this car looks. I remember when it came out, I was like, wow, this is a really striking design, very nice looking from Mercedes. And even more so for this specific one because it has the AMG line, which gives you the aggressive front bumper, rear diffuser, and bigger wheels. And since this also has the night package, the additional black trimming on the front grille and all around the car, which flow beautifully with this polar white exterior paint. Now, the only thing I would change to improve the already good looks of the GLS is probably in the rear. I feel like it's a little dull and traditional compared to some of the other Mercedes SUVs. Needs a little bit more flair to bring some excitement. But otherwise, the GLS is an absolutely gorgeous looking SUV. Alright, so now let's take a look at the engine details. This has a 3-liter turbocharged inline 6-cylinder with a mild hybrid setup. It produces 362 horsepower and 369 pounds-feet of torque. It has made it to a 9-speed automatic transmission, putting power down to all 4 wheels as standard. Now, about that mild hybrid setup, it's actually a 48-volt battery that's combined with the integrated starter generator. It gives a boost of 21 horsepower and 184 pounds-feet of torque. So when you take all this into consideration, this car can actually coast gas-free using that 48-volt battery and integrated starter. Now, what does this all translate to as far as performance? Even though this is a big, heavy SUV, 0 to 60 in 5.9 seconds, which is fairly decent considering that this car weighs 5,500 pounds. Now, about the all-wheel drive system, and most people are just going to use this on a day-to-day basis, but if you wanted to tow anything, this does have the all-wheel drive system, as I mentioned, and it does have the ability to switch 100% of the power either to the front or to the rear wheels as it sees fit. Now, as far as the towing I was just talking about, if you wanted to take this thing on a weekend getaway, on a camping trip or something, 7,700 pounds, which is class leading and 200 pounds more than the BMW X7, as long as you option in the trailer tow hitch package, which I believe is $500 for this GLS. So that's enough about the engine. Let me take you around back and show you some of the conveniences and the trunk's cargo space in this GLS. Alright, so now the rear end, and before talking about the trunk cargo space and how much stuff you can put in there, just a really quick skimming of the rear end design. This one has an optional spoiler up here, which I'm not really sure what the function of it is, considering this is a big heavy SUV that can carry 6 or 7 people, but nonetheless it looks cool. And then down here you've got the dual exit exhaust with a chrome finish, and surrounding them is a gloss black diffuser as a part of that AMG package I stated in the earlier part of the video. So now let's jump into the trunk and how you open it. There are 4 ways of opening this trunk. There's a button on the interior, there's a button on the key, there's also comfort access, there's a button right here on top of the license plate, and there's also a kicking motion that you can use underneath the bumper. But when you do open this thing, of course it's electronic opening, you're going to be greeted with a fairly decent amount of space. Now the one thing to keep in mind with these big 3-row SUVs, when all 3 rows are up, or let's just say the 3rd row in the back is up, your trunk space is somewhat limited. But I can tell you that this GLS has more trunk space when the 3rd row is up compared to the X7. It's a little wider. You can put 2 medium-sized luggage pieces in here. It's a pretty decent amount of space when all 3 rows are up. Now, when all 3 rows are down, this has 85 cubic feet of space, and it's actually massive back here to put your stuff. And speaking of folding down the seats, you have the ability to fold down all of the seats from the trunk. There's no manual operation. You don't have to go around to the middle of the car. And this is an ultra conveniency. So there are separate buttons for each seat, and of course all of these are electronically controlled. You push each button and down fold the seats. There's another set of buttons on the other side that fold down the 3rd row seat, and it's just an ultra convenience to be able to do this from the back of the car just using buttons. Now, another layer of conveniency for all of you guys out there who are shuffling in big things or heavy things into the back of your car. Now, because the GLS has an air suspension, which I'll cover here in a minute, there's a button here that allows you to lower this trunk portion of the car, so the rear end will actually drop down lower, just in case you've got something that is big, that's heavy, and you don't want to lift it as much. So that is also an ultra conveniency in this GLS. I also saw that in the X7. So it's a great feature for that type of scenario when you've got something big that you want to lug into your trunk. So overall, the trunk space is fantastic in this GLS, and having the additional layers of convenience of being able to lower the 2nd and 3rd row seats using a touch of a button, lowering the car, the back half of the car, so you can lift things in and put them in there. The Mercedes really thought it through and built in a lot of conveniency, day-to-day conveniency, very functional things into the GLS. And lastly, closing the trunk, of course, because this is electronic opening, it is also electronic closing. There's a button right here. You push that and closes the trunk. You don't have to do anything. There's also a button right next to the one I pushed that will close the trunk and lock it for you. But now, I talked about an air suspension earlier. Let me go around to the side and talk about the wheels and the air suspension. All right, so now let's talk about that air suspension I keep mentioning about this GLS. So it's actually a really sophisticated suspension. It has the ability to control the dampening and the spring rates on each corner individually. So that's a pretty big deal. It also has the ability to raise and lower itself depending on the characteristics or the road conditions. So the ride height is really important for ground clearance and such, and especially if you're off-roading in your $90,000 Mercedes luxury SUV. All right, now let's talk about the wheels, but before doing that, really quickly, it's got these really nice looking fender extensions that hug over on top of the fender arches to cover the wheels much more fuller, for the lack of a better term. Now let's switch to the wheels. So the Mercedes is actually really strong in this category, specifically for the GLS, because there are 9 different options of wheels you can choose from in this car when you look at the design and the colors that those are available in, ranging all the way from the smallest wheel, which is 20 inches, to the largest wheel, which is 23 inches, and that is what this car has today. It's a $3,100 option, but you get something unique here. A 23-inch wheel is the biggest wheel that Mercedes offers on any of their production cars available today. So you are getting something special in your GLS450 if you option this 23-inch wheel. Now, beyond that, you do get bigger tires as well. 285 section up front, 325 section in the rear. So these are big tires as well. Now, one thing you may have to consider about these really cool looking wheels if you're planning to own this thing for a long period of time is if you damage them, or when it comes time to replace your big meaty tires, you're going to spend some money here. Just something to think about. But maybe the cool factor overweighs all of those things. So that's basically the wheel, tire, suspension. Let's go on to the interior and I'll talk to you about what it's like in there. All right, so now the interior of the GLS, and even though the exterior is important, I think for cars like this that are going to be used on a day-to-day basis, the interior carries a little bit more weight, at least they would for me. So now let's jump into some of the characteristics on how this thing feels on the inside. From a driver's standpoint, you do sit up really nice and high. You do see the hood lines on top of you, but you have this command position, kind of looking out on top of everybody else. So if you're a person who likes that, obviously you're going to be into SUVs, but in this one you do sit up pretty high and have a nice driving position as well. As far as the interior space, how close do I sit to my passenger? It does feel pretty nice in here, decent amount of space, really nice headroom, really nice legroom. I don't feel claustrophobic in here as a driver or as a passenger. Beyond that, the interior quality is top notch. The softness of the leather, the material, the look of the leather, the fit and the finish, specifically in this spec with the white exterior and the beige color interior. It has black stitching and this beautiful light color open pore wood trim with a black dash on top of it. It's just a really nice looking spec, and overall the GLS interior is really high quality and really nicely designed. Now let's jump into some of the details. So this seat, this is a heated and ventilated seat as standard. It is an extremely comfortable seat. As I said, the leather is very soft and supple. The seat cushioning is very nice. No issues with the comfort level. Of course, this is not an aggressive seat, so don't expect any type of like hold you snug into position. This is a daily driver oriented seat, and I think it does that admirably. Very nice. Now, the gauges and the infotainment screen. Two 12.3-inch gauges. I really like the Mercedes gauge cluster because it's easy to use, easy to read, very crisp, very clear, and the technology is up to what you would expect in 2022. Now, the infotainment system is also very good. This is the MBUX, the latest Mercedes infotainment system that has the Hey Mercedes functionality. I do like MBUX a lot for its simplicity. I do like BMW iDrive as well, but this is actually simpler than BMW iDrive. Everything is kind of laid out there in front of you. It is a touch screen. It's extremely responsive. The graphics, it does have Android Auto and Apple CarPlay. So the infotainment system, the screens, the gauges, all that stuff is top notch in the GLS. Now, some of the other details coming down to the center section, the climate control buttons are all of excellent quality. They look really nice, laid out simply out in front of you with the metal brush finish and the aluminum look. Very cool. You've got an opening here with two cup holders and charging for you. So two USB Type-C outlets. There is a wireless charging functionality in here as well. The center trackpad here also gives you an additional layer of interfacing with the infotainment system if you don't want to use your finger and the screen. And the center armrest is nicely padded and a decent amount of space with another USB Type-C charger there. So that's the front seat. Let me take you to the second row and talk about what it's like over there. All right, so now the passenger area in the GLS, starting off with the second row. You do have options back here with your configuration. You can get captain style chairs like there is in this car. This is an optional feature. And I'll talk about these here in a second as far as the feel and the functionality of them. But you do have an option for a bench style seat here. Now the difference between those two, advantages and disadvantages. So the bench style seat gives you an additional occupant. So you can get 7 passengers in the GLS if you option in the bench style seat, which is standard. You don't have to option that. Now, if you pay the additional captain style chairs, you drop down to 6-person max capacity because obviously you lose the center section. Now, the advantage of the captain style chairs, of course, they look a little cooler, but you have this easy accessibility into the third row with this center section. So you can just walk in here and jump in the back. You don't have to shuffle around and move seats and do all of that stuff. Now, you do have the ability to move the seats around and to collapse them. And on this side where I'm sitting at behind the passenger seat, it's electronic. So there's a button right here. You pull on this and it pulls the seat forward, lifts it up for easy access to the back. I'm 5'10", 5'11". I did not have any issues jumping into the back without using the center access configuration with the captain style seats. So that's basically the configuration. Now let's talk about the seat. So the seat is actually pretty comfortable. I do have my own armrest here on each seat. I do have full recline forward and customizability as far as the seat goes. And finally, for the second row, you do have charging capabilities back here, which is extremely important nowadays considering how connected everybody is with smartphones. You have two USB style C outlets and a traditional 115 volt plug-in style outlet as well, which is very convenient considering if you've got a laptop or if you've actually got the cell phone charger head that you need to plug in for faster charging. So it's always good to have as many options for charging as possible. All right, and now I'm sitting in the third row, and as I said, I'm 5'10", 5'11", and I fit back here just fine. I would imagine somebody the same size as me sitting next to me as far as shoulder room. We might touch elbows, but it feels pretty good back here. As far as headroom, I fit just fine. My head is not even touching the ceiling. Somebody maybe 6 feet, 6'1" max, somebody taller than that, probably gonna hit your head on the ceiling. As far as legroom, I do feel just fine back here. The captain's chair is mounted pretty far back and I don't feel claustrophobic whatsoever. Now, there are additional charging capabilities back here. There's actually more back here for the third row than there is in the second row. There's 2 on each side here, so there's 4 just back here. USB Type-C. I do have my own cup holder, which is always great. So that's pretty much it. Overall, I think the interior space of the GLS is great. It's, again, of great quality. I love this beige leather. It's beautiful to look at, very high quality. The conveniencies, the ergonomics of the interior are also very good. Jumping in and out of the third row seat, I didn't have any issues, especially with the captain's chair. I would be interested to see what it's like with the bench style seat. The X7 was actually fantastic in that regard. The entire bench seat moved forward and up, no issues climbing in there. But again, the captain style is very easy to get into. This seat right here does go forward and up, so easy accessibility whether you're using the center section or from the side here. You can fold these things down manually. So the ergonomics and the conveniency and the storage space in here, the overall ambiance of the technology and the feel of the interior is very, very good. Now, beyond the interior and the exterior, let's go to the driving portion of the review and see what this thing feels like behind the wheel. All right, so now the driving portion of the GLS review. And as always, as I mentioned, the visibility out the front is great. No issues with visibility out the sides. The safety equipment in this car is excellent. There's a bunch of stuff that Mercedes fills in here. Blind spot monitoring, front and rear view cameras. So you can option in even additional 360 cameras and all that stuff. And there's automatic braking. So there's a lot of stuff that Mercedes is packing in here as far as safety features. Now the base price of this car is $77,000, which is a couple $1,000s more expensive than the base level of the X7. Now this one I'm driving is actually pretty loaded up. I believe the window sticker says $90,000, so $13,000 in options. Now remember, this does have the 23-inch wheels, which by itself are $3,000, and there's some other knickknacks as well, so you can option it up. And it's no surprise, most German automobile manufacturers give you a bunch of options that you can a la carte add to your car. So now let's go ahead and turn this thing on. The inline 6-cylinder is very, very quiet, very, very smooth. I drove this same engine in the GT53. It's much louder and pronounced in that car, but in this it's tuned to be extremely calm, extremely quiet. You barely even feel it turn on. So let's back up here really quickly and go for a quick drive. Now the throttle engagement is also very, very smooth. This ride is just a very smooth ride. It's what you would expect from a Mercedes. The ride comfort is good. The seat cushioning is good. It just bumps it all. I mean, it soaks it all up. So as far as the other driving dynamics, this is a almost 400 horsepower car, a little bit over 350, but it is very heavy. So I'm not going to give it a lot of gas because that's not what it's really made for. But I can tell you this, that there's plenty of passing power and download torque in order for you to get going on a day-to-day basis. No issues with driving this thing as far as power goes. Now, in other conditions like towing and stuff, I can't comment on that, but for day-to-day, it's perfectly fine. Now, the one thing that I do have to say about this car is the steering is very numb and very jello-y. I like the steering and the handling characteristics of the X7 better than this, but I've always felt that way, and it's not different. In BMW cars, I feel like the driving dynamics are a little bit more direct, a little bit more sporty, and Mercedes cars are a little bit more lofty, a little bit more casual in the driving experience. I can't say this is more comfortable than an X7, because that X7 was also very comfortable, but this feels more lofty, more land yacht, than just an overall more laid back driving characteristic and dynamic. And one thing that's also really good about these new Mercedes cars is with the EQ boost and the start-stop technology, that transition between when you put your foot on the brake and it turning off and back on is so seamless now. I remember in the early days when start-stop technology was so bad and so intrusive to the driving experience, you barely feel this thing turning on and off. It's very smooth to engage and disengage when you're braking and taking off. Now, the rest of it, the way it makes you feel, you do sit very high. It gives you this command driving position. You do have great visibility all around you, and your passengers also are very comfortable as well. Now, would I recommend this car over an X7? It depends. It really depends. How important is the driving dynamic for you? Because if you're kind of looking for something a little bit more sporty and a little bit more feel in the ride, you may not like this GLS. If you're looking for something a little bit more traditional, more lofty, this might be a good car for you. But again, overall, this is a great car. Those things I just mentioned are subjective. I can tell you from an objective standpoint, this is a great car. It has great design. The interior ergonomics are good. The way it makes you feel, the quality, when you look at it, it just looks nice in here. So that's pretty much all I've got. Otherwise, if you've got any other questions, please feel free to leave me a comment down in the section below, or send me a message on Instagram at DriveSteady. But thank you for watching this video. Until next time, drive steady.